And without further ado, I'm going to move on to our second speaker and our second company. And I'd love to welcome Blake Richards, who is the founder and CEO of Elucid BioImaging. You know, sometimes I get a little tripped up with that, but Blake, welcome. We're excited to have you.
No worries, Katie, and thanks for having me. I'd just like to confirm that you can see my screen right now.
We can. Go right ahead.
All right, perfect. So I am Blake Richards, the CEO of Elucid. I'm here to speak about the work we are doing to predict and prevent heart attacks and strokes. So to best understand the benefits of our technology, let's start by looking at the current treatment pathways for patients with suspected coronary artery disease that often lead to unnecessary procedures, undetected disease, or suboptimal medical therapy. So patients start typically with a risk assessment or general risk stratification, which could be a physical, a blood test, or a range of other tests. But from there, they may move on to non-invasive testing. It's about 10 million of these a year in the US, which can be an ECG, SPECT, or more and more commonly, we're seeing CT angiography being used, as we've seen consistent increases supported by clinical evidence and guidelines. Now, based on the result of this test, a patient may be sent to the cath lab for an invasive coronary angiogram to assess the need for revascularization. However, with standard care, about 55% of those trips are ultimately unnecessary, leading to increased costs, extremely limited margin for the facility, it's suboptimal use of the cath lab and of clinician time, there's unnecessary radiation exposure, unnecessary burden on the patient, and you're potentially underserving other patients. Now, FFRCT is a revolutionary capability, its ability to measure flow limitation non-invasively to avoid these unnecessary trips to the cath lab. But it's not a complete solution in and of itself. It's unable to assess plaque stability to determine that risk of sudden rupture, nor can it inform therapeutic selection specific to the patient, which leads to suboptimal medical therapy, which is based largely at this point on trial and error. Our platform is unique and grounded in a histological validation. So what we've literally done is taken patients who had a CT angiography and prospectively collected tissue specimens collected from a procedural intervention. Those tissue specimens were then physically characterized under microscope by 3 pathologists each, including Dr. Anu Vermani, to determine true histopathology. We then took the CT angiography and restored the image using algorithms to mitigate the effects of calcium blooming and other artifacts. So we took that true histopathology as determined by the pathologist and co-registered it to the CT angiography, leaving us with an image where we have true histopathology all along the vessel, including lipid rich necrotic core, intraplaque hemorrhage, calcification, etc. Now, this acts as the ground truth for our machine intelligence models. So what we can do now is take in a new CT angiography without the tissue and run it through those models and characterize the tissue, not based on Hounsfield units, but an intelligent characterization based on true histopathology, so emulating what the pathologist would do. Now, it's one thing to build the models, but we had to validate it. So we had an independent data set, had a set of paired samples, CTA along with tissue. We ran the CTA through the models and saw where we identified there was lipid rich necrotic core. Did that agree with the pathologist? Where we said there was intraplaque hemorrhage, did that agree? Where we said there was calcification, did that agree? And our accuracy was so high that not only do we have the only FDA clearance and the only CE marking for non-invasive quantitation validated against histopathology, we have the only tool that has its accuracy in its FDA labeling. And on top of that, we have the only clearance to quantify lipid rich necrotic core and soon intraplaque hemorrhage. So there's significant IP protecting this methodology. We have a very large proprietary biobank of tissue specimens. There's very unique technical know-how that went into developing this technology. Now, it's important to draw the distinction between what we're doing and other Hounsfield unit thresholding methods of plaque characterization. So what we're doing is comparing the tissue types to what's actually found in biology. So we are measuring all key drivers of plaque rupture, including lipid.
Blake, I'm going to stop you just for a second because we do no longer have your slides. Go ahead and share your screen again.
Okay.
Not sure what happened.
I accidentally clicked off of share by accident. Just go ahead and restart.
All right, let me know.
There you go. You're good.
All right, apologies
Sorry.
there. No worries, no worries. So what we're doing is actually characterizing the tissues in comparison to what's found in biology. So we're characterizing true tissue types, which gives us our unique clearance to use actual specific tissue labels. So Lipid Rich Necrotic Core, Intraplaque Hemorrhage. And as such, we can validate the accuracy of these. We're looking at patterns and distribution, making intelligent characterizations. Other tools that have been around for decades are measuring ill-defined terms such as low-density plaque, which one physician has described as a black smudge on the image. These don't exist in biology, and as such, there's no way to actually validate the accuracy because there's nothing to compare to as ground truth. And in the models that we've looked at for event prediction, so prediction of heart attack and stroke, the key drivers have been lipid-rich necrotic core, intraplaque hemorrhage, and cap thickness, things that only we're able to measure based on this methodology. Importantly, lipid-rich necrotic core, for example, doesn't have a defined Hounsfield unit threshold. You can't set parameters that would define where that is. It's heterogeneous in nature. So it's our approach that uniquely allows us to quantify this. Now, as I mentioned, we take in a standard CT angiography, we run it through our image restoration algorithms, and we quantify the plaque. But then we take that plaque quantitation and perform a number of downstream models that allow the physician to make actionable decisions based upon that information. So first is the measurement of plaque stability. The next is our measurement of fractional flow reserve to inform whether revascularization may be needed or not. We're measuring this, though, derived from plaque morphology based on the vasodilative capacity of the vessel wall rather than fluid dynamics. Additionally, we're able to perform models that assess a patient's risk of event over time, informing the urgency of the treatment. And perhaps most excitingly, we're able to actually enable precision medicine in a manner similar to what occurs in oncology to inform optimal medical therapy specific to the patient. Now, we are currently commercial stage with FDA clearance and CE marking for our plaque quantitation in a number of key opinion leader sites around the globe, along with working with a number of pharmaceutical companies and researchers. We recently closed out a $10 million Series A, and we're excited to take the next steps as a company. I'd like to call attention to our esteemed scientific advisory board of cardiologists, vascular surgeons, and radiologists who are supporting the clinical direction of the company, both with the current platform as well as what's being developed moving forward. And call attention to our leadership team with demonstrated success in developing technology and launching said products commercially in the imaging and AI space. Appreciate taking the time to present today.
Blake, thank you so much. This is really exciting. I mean, it seems to me, again, as a pediatrician, we're working on preventing cardiovascular disease. So hopefully, they don't need these studies in the future. But it seems like you are far ahead from anyone else on the market that might be looking at this same area. Talk about what differentiates you from your competitors, say.
Yeah, so the way we developed this technology was always based in a ground truth. So using histopathology as the basis has enabled us to perform these downstream models with the necessary inputs with the level of sensitivity and specificity to derive things like virtual transcriptomics and that time to event prediction. This was all planned many years in advance to lead to ultimately to where we are now and where we're headed. And so this approach differentiates us because we actually have that ability to perform that modeling at such a granular level. So I think the ground truth is ultimately very important, but the time it takes to collect this biobank and to build these truth sources, it also can't be underestimated. It was all part of a cogent plan to take us to where we're going in the future.
Yeah, and we have a clarification from one member of our audience. And their question really is this an AI algorithm? So when we talk about modeling and those types of things, is this an AI algorithm using imaging alone for this predictive modeling that you can do for each patient?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So the only input that we need is the CT angiography. Now, the models were trained with paired samples of CTA and tissue specimens, or CTA and FFR measured in the cath lab, or CTA and outcomes for the patients, or CTA and true expression. But when used as a product, the only input is the CTA, and then that references the truth basis that exists within the machine intelligence models.
All right. I want to touch on one additional thing, and now we're getting tons of questions from our audience as well. But you mentioned precision medicine, which again, this seems like a big buzzword these days in healthcare. Talk more about what that looks like for Elucid and how you're going to accomplish that.
Sure, and I'll echo that it may be overutilized a bit today, and maybe the term has lost some of the impact that it should have. But what we're doing, we classify it as true precision medicine. So I want to give an imperfect analogy here to what occurs in oncology, where you can go in and take a biopsy of a tumor, and we've seen all these advancements over the past decades, where with that information, you can look at a patient's expression. You can make treatment decisions tailored to the patient, determining which treatment pathway would be best for them individually. We haven't had that level of advancement in cardiovascular disease. If you were to try to biopsy an artery, if you try to biopsy a lesion, you'd potentially be causing the very event you're trying to prevent. And blood tests don't tell you what's occurring at the lesion itself, and it doesn't have all of the same measurements that are necessary in order to make that treatment decision. So we would posture that non-invasive imaging is the best method for approaching this. So what we've literally done is taken patients with CTA paired with tissue specimens collected, but we've actually determined true expression, so coding and non-coding RNA transcripts from that tissue. So now we have CTA paired with true expression, and we use that as a secondary truth basis for our models. We're then able to take in a new CTA and estimate expression. We translate that into the dominant mechanism with the intention in the future to be able to answer the question at the patient level: are they a likely responder to an intensive lipid lowering therapeutic? Are they a likely responder to a systemic inflammation therapeutic? And by doing these things, we can change the cost equation on a drug like a PCSK9 that's cost prohibitive to prescribe to the general patient population, but would be incredibly effective in prescribing to those that are likely responders. And as such, we can increase utilization, improve outcomes, and actually reduce costs by avoiding said events.
Wow. That's all I have to say to that. Wow. I mean, this is very cool. I know we have a ton of questions. I'm going to end on one, because there are several people that are alluding to this in our Q&A. So what has been, have you been able to demonstrate improved clinical outcomes, right? The end all be all is if we can save patients' lives. So, to what level at this point have these models been proven clinically?
Sure. So we've done a fair number of studies across the board. Each of the models is validated separately. I'll say, and this question may be alluding to that most directly, is the event prediction. So we presented at the Society for Vascular Surgery conference last year, or a PI of ours did, and demonstrated there was about a 40% improvement in stroke prediction as compared to stenosis-based guidelines. A similar study in MACE prediction was about 30% better. The evidence base out there for fractional flow reserve from CT is already quite strong, and we've demonstrated that we perform that with statistical significance. The precision medicine that I mentioned, we have published on this and have demonstrated early feasibility in our ability to estimate it, and we're moving forward towards demonstrating how that could impact clinical care in a very positive way in terms of optimal medical therapy selection for the patient.
Wow. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Blake. I know, like I said, there are many questions that are still in our Q&A and we're just out of time. But as I mentioned, Blake will be here after our last pitch. We will go to our networking lounge and he will be available to answer any additional questions you might have. So thank you again for being here tonight. And again, as Jennifer said, thanks to all of our presenters this evening who are here. And without further ado, I would love to actually introduce our last CEO and company, and that is Dr. Tal Rapke, and he is the CEO and founder of a company called ScalaMed. Tal, go ahead and share your screen.
Fantastic. Well, good evening, everybody. It's great to be here and I look forward to the opportunity. So I'm a physician by training. I spent my early career in digital health before moving into pharmaceuticals and before becoming an entrepreneur for my sins. We at ScalaMed have created essentially a way to reinvent prescriptions, which haven't actually been touched in reality since their inception. We enable for the first time any doctor to send a prescription directly from any EMR directly to the patient's phone, putting the patient back in control over pharmacy selection and enabling us to create a really interesting touch point with which to access and ultimately influence patients and their outcomes. So the problem that we've been trying to solve is that there are 318,000 health apps on the App Store, and they're all looking to win patients' attention. And for the most part, real engagement is still elusive. And so every company with a health app is saying, what did we build? What feature could we have that's going to make our patients sticky to us and make them come back again and again? And we recognize that if you want patients to engage, you've got to give them something to do. The most frequent healthcare transaction is actually a prescription. And yet today, prescriptions for the most part bypass patients, sidelining patients because prescriptions flow from doctor to pharmacy. And at ScalaMed, we reinvented that and reinvented a way to take the most frequent healthcare transaction and create out of it a gateway for patient access and influence by sending the prescription first to the patient. The way it works is the next time a patient comes to you, rather than the patient saying, send it to Walgreens on Eastern Parkway, the patient can say, hey doc, send it to me by selecting ScalaMed as a pharmacy. Or the doctor, the physician can say, we now send prescriptions to you, select ScalaMed rather than Walgreens. And within a second, the patient gets a text to say your prescriptions have arrived on your phone. They click on the link and they open up any third-party app that is licensed our platform, where for the first time the patient can see good RX pricing, real-time benefit insurance pricing, and work out where their lowest cost pharmacy is prior to making a pharmacy selection. They can look to see which pharmacies open at midnight. We educate them what the medicine is for and how they can use it safely and effectively. We warn them if accidentally a prescription is prescribed that there's an interaction warning. And within 3 clicks from their phone, the patient can select any pharmacy based on location, based on opening hours, and based on pricing to send the prescription for delivery or for pickup. But that's not the end of it. After setting the prescription, the ScalaMed platform enables us to come back and re-engage the patient, checking in, did they take the pills? Are they having side effects? And if there's an issue, being able to link them back appropriately, back into care. And so for anyone who's licensed our platform, it does 2 amazing things. Number 1, it brings their patients inside their platform. And secondly, enables them to then direct and influence patients in real time to help deliver a better outcome. As I mentioned, ScalaMed enables with a very, very easy 5 lines of code to enable our plug and play facility for this application to use in any health application. So if you're an insurance company, you can then have your patients' prescriptions coming back, your patients come back into your platform again and again to manage their prescriptions, to direct them to lower cost pharmacies or in-network pharmacies, and being able to support them with medication. If you're a telemedicine platform, telemedicine companies are able to ensure that when they prescribe, that they're able to keep those prescriptions inside their platform, reducing a lot of the burden of working out which pharmacy, and if the prescriptions end up at the wrong place, you're not going to get that phone call. And finally, pharmaceutical companies are able to roll out the velvet red carpet to be able to create a seamless experience to onboard a patient onto a specialty pharmacy, throwing on cash coupons, throwing on coupon support, education, patient support programs, and a hub-based program, as well as checking in with the patients to ensure they're actually taking their medicines. We started our journey with over 6,000 patients across sites in Texas. We proved that you could easily get patients to come on board out of any clinic. We got awesome provider feedback, nearly an 80% net promoter score, and have won a number of awards. We've got our first license, which is generating revenue, a second license coming on board now with our virtual primary care group, a third license with one of our largest PBMs in the country, and we're launching a bunch of pilots at Mayo Clinic in Q4. As you can see, some of the pilots and some of the companies we're working with are at the top. We're increasingly growing our revenue. We're raising a $3 million seed round at this stage. We're onboarding customers, making the smartest prescription that exists today, creating an immense amount of clinical data to be able to prove out the impact that we're having on patients and on outcomes. And finally, we're creating a system where scalability will become the new verb of prescribing. In very brief summary, we've reinvented a prescription. We've made it patient-centric, and we've created an opportunity to make a prescription a gateway for true patient access and influence. My final ask today is we are looking for new pilot sites with which to roll out our technology, and also looking for good strategic investors. Thanks for the opportunity, and I'll hand over to Katie and some questions.
Great, thank you, Tal. Great presentation. This is exciting. A couple of questions that I have, because I think all of us probably know that there are other pharmacy services, other apps out there that patients and providers have to choose from. So why you? What makes ScalaMed best?
Yes, I think if you look, you're right. There are many people recognizing that the entire process of prescriptions are broken. There are many pharmacies and on our digital pharmacies, your Amazons, etc., that are looking to hijack your prescriptions and ensure that you send your prescriptions to them. But there's really no one who's truly sitting with the patient to try to give them back empowerment and control, so that with the complexity of pricing and information and working out what the right pharmacy is for them, that exists. So we really sit in that true no man's land, where we sit aligned to outcomes, we sit aligned to the physician experience, we sit aligned to the patient to ensure that they get the best possible outcome from that medicine. If pricing is what they're looking for, they can find the lowest cost pricing. If it's about convenience, great. If they want a 24/7 record of their prescription, that's awesome. If they're a snowbird traveling across the country, we give them ownership over their prescriptions. And for anyone who's licensed our platform, it creates that access point where they gain visibility so they can proactively support patients in real time. And there is no one out there doing it the way that we are.
Very cool. So a couple of questions from our audience, and I had similar questions. So this seems like it would be a change in workflow. I mean, first of all, you and I know that physicians never like to change their workflow, right? But a change in workflow for healthcare providers, a change in workflow even for patients. Tell us about, I know you said 6,000 patients that you've had run through these kind of adoption studies. What were your adoption rates? What is it? Is it more difficult? Is the workflow easier? What have you heard from both patients and providers?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we'll start on the provider side. So any provider that's ever had the question when they're managing a patient, when the patient says, hey, you know the CVS near the Lowe's? Have any of you tried to go inside your EMR and actually find that CVS near the Lowe's? That takes a good minute of your time working out which road it's on, what's the address. There are often four Walgreens on Main Street. So the ability for any physician to be able to say to a patient, like we used to do with paper, the ability to flick and figure, hey patient, I'm now giving you the prescription. This is a smart prescription. It's going to enable you to take it wherever you want. It's going to give you the pricing. So I'm not going to get a phone call back later on saying, hey, doc, I'm at the pharmacy, never arrived, or hey, doc, the price is wrong, or they're out of stock, or hey, I couldn't make it there because I had to pick up my daughter from ballet. Do you mind sending it to the Costco near the Lowe's? So it creates that ability for a physician to be able to practice, to be able to give the patient back control. For the patient, so from a workflow perspective, it's much easier to find ScalaMed inside your EMR, ScalaMed patient, rather than searching through the 15,000 Walgreens and working out which is the right Walgreens. So there is no change. It is integrated into every pharmacy or every physician e-prescribing workflow, and there should not be any change in workflow. In fact, we found from physicians told us in our rollouts, they saved about a minute per patient because when they saw ScalaMed as the selected pharmacy, they no longer needed to double check which pharmacy the patient wants because they knew that the prescription was going to flow directly to them. And on the patient side, yes, the first time you sign up, it takes our average is about 45 seconds to sign up to the platform. But beyond that point, the ability to have a portable, flexible prescription for a patient is outstanding. It's like the first time you ever used Uber. It's a delightful experience to now take over control over that prescription process, know where it is in the process, and be able to make that selection. So from the workflow perspective, we proved in our pilots that you could easily onboard more than 60% of all comers to a clinic. Patients loved it, and physicians saved themselves time.
Great. A couple of follow-up questions that have come as you were giving that answer. Which EMRs are you what would I say, not affiliated with, but maybe are you able to integrate with EMRs at this point? Is your platform able to, or is that necessary even to use ScalaMed?
There's no integration required. For many of the physicians on the phone, you could probably look at your platform today, create a prescription and go to select a pharmacy and you'll find ScalaMed patient in there. The only reason that they may not, so it pretty much is in every single EMR that enables e-prescribing. So there is no reason for any integration. In terms of writing back those, so what we have over time is the ability to also enable groups who are involved in value-based care, the ability to see in real time, what did the patient even do with that prescription that I sent them? So if a patient receives a prescription with ScalaMed and they don't fill it after an hour, 4 hours, 24 hours, we prompt them, we nudge them, and then if they're really not doing the right thing, we can then link them back into care. And there are abilities then to write back into EMRs to be able to do that. We're working on some of those integrations as we speak.
Well, I'm assuming that would do great things for, let's say, medication adherence. And in the end, it's about patient outcomes, right? So one question, and this came not only from me, but also from someone in our audience, talk a little bit more about the Mayo Clinic pilots and what are the clinical endpoints that you're looking for in those pilots?
Yeah, look, the two major foci of the endpoints there are looking mainly at quality improvement. So does it reduce workload on the physician side, which we're very confident it will? We've seen that in our initial pilots. Does it drive patients to better engage in the platform, better patient satisfaction, and then looking at adherence levels around the medications? One of the things about ScalaMed is today, if you're trying to look at adherence and you've sent a patient's prescription on their behalf to a pharmacy, so as a physician, you've taken on the burden of working out which is the right pharmacy and sending it there. What happens at a pharmacy is a pharmacist immediately processes that prescription. They push the claim through to the payer. So if you were actually to go in and have a look deep in the data and see what happened in that prescription, it actually appears like they picked it up and they filled it, when in reality, it sat on a brown paper bag on the shelf. And about a month after a couple of text messages to the patient, they reversed the transaction and pushed it through. So it's kind of that ability in real time to see what's happening and to be able to create that access point to the individual and back to the physician.
That's fantastic. Tal, we have several more questions from our audience, but we are getting to the end of time. And I like to end on time, so we'll have this full 30 minutes of networking time as well. But we really appreciate you being here this evening and telling us all about ScalaMed. This is exciting. And again, I could see this really impacting clinical outcomes in the end. So I'll be excited to see a little bit more about your pilots that are upcoming. Thank you for being here.
Awesome. Thanks, Katie. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, everyone, for being here.